Welcome to another one of our presentations about the history of photography. For those of you who have not seen our saved presentations, they're available on YouTube by just searching for PHSNE, and you will find a variety of content there that might be interesting. I will turn this over to Dana G, and she will launch the presentation. And I wanted to welcome all of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Joel. Hi, I'm Dana G. I'm the program coordinator for PHSNE. And before we get started and before I introduce Mary, I just have a few announcements. You probably saw when you entered the Zoom meeting that the presentation is being recorded. So the active screen is being recorded. And if you haven't used Zoom before, your controls are at the bottom of your screen. And I wanted to mention this, that please stay muted during the presentation. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold the questions for Mary until the end. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, you can go to the bottom of your screen. There's a chat window, and just please type your question into chat addressed to everyone so we can all see it. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll do questions. Let me introduce Mary to you. For over 30 years, Mary Panzer has studied photography and American culture. From 1992 to 2000, she was curator of photographs at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. Panzer has written about Richard Avedon, Matthew Brady, Lewis Hine, Stanley Kubrick, and Life magazine, and is co-author of Things as They Are, Photojournalism in Context since 1955. Mary, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Now I'm not muted. How does that look, Dana? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and talk to you while we look at some slides. And thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. So some of this might be a little scholarly, but I've been feeling serious these days about the state of the world. Why do I call this a democratic? Why do I call these kind of portraits democratic? And here's part of our definition, so keep it in mind while we're looking at the rest of this stuff. It's belief in or practice of the idea that all people are socially equal, relating to, appealing to, or available to the broad masses of the people, and certainly these portraits are that, and favoring social equality. And what I'd like to argue or talk to you about is how these very common but unstudied kind of pictures really show a world in which society is completely in balance, which is very unusual, very rare. We'll see if I can get there. Now, why won't this go forward? Okay. So these street vendor pictures, here's a picture of an American family in Wiesbaden on the sort of major shopping street. It's a form of a postcard. On the back, they wrote about how surprised they were that this was such a good picture, but that whenever they were walking up and down the street, there were so many photographers that came out and took pictures of you and then handed you a card and said, do you want to buy the picture? She said, they said they were all over. These kinds of photographers were very common from the 1930s to the 1970s. There we go. Okay, so they were in Cairo, they were in Vancouver, they were in Cape Town, they were in Poland, right? And as you can see that they all make people look pretty much the same. This is an example from San Francisco and a bunch of things that I'll be talking to you more about today. Everybody, this format treats everyone exactly the same. they call them street photographs, but we use street photographs as a word to, or term to define art photography that we know about, say like Robert Frank or Gary Winogrand or Vivian Mayer. And these are not that, because they are not made to be the property of the maker of the picture. They are made to be the property of the person in the picture. They're also not like Seydou Keita or all the many African and South American, Central American photographers who set up studios on the street. So they're on the street, but they're acting like it's a studio and it's a commissioned picture. They aren't like that either, although they're street studios, street photographers. A good way to talk about this finally is I came and fell back on the actual camera, which is called a street vending camera or a street vendor camera. And you had to have one of these cameras, especially at the beginning, to make these pictures. You can see, if you look at it, you'll see a movie camera turned on its side. You've got the view coming down, the viewer coming down the middle. And below that is a stack of cards. You also see that there's the lens going out and a lens coming down. What is that card for? This is what the card is for. Sorry. Once the photographer takes your picture, he hands you a card. A motion picture of you has just been taken. See how you look in action. Pictures mailed anywhere. You know, here you are, natural, full length. City streets as a background, similar to newsreels. And the other thing you'll notice is this number. If you agreed when you got handed this card to fork over 50 cents or 25 cents or $1, they will mail you your pictures back. Satisfaction guaranteed. And if you can see, here's one of those kinds of pictures. The woman in the picture said, guess who didn't want their picture taken today? There she is, and she doesn't look very happy, but she bought it anyway. And you can see right here the little number that goes along with the picture. So this is another key aspect of how to recognize this kind of photography if you come across it. Here's another one from Mexico. I'm sorry, not Mexico, Guadalajara. So what you see are people centered in the screen. Their faces are visible. They are in motion. They are in context. But with very few exceptions, they're not usually annotated the way Cool Papa and Ducky worked their postcard to go to Bug Eye. And this lady, Hello Precious, sent her note to somebody special on the bottom of the card. But what we see are ordinary people by an anonymous photographer with these certain formal characteristics. And once you start to look for them, you'll see a lot more. If you look on eBay, you can ask for them as walking pictures, or because they usually take place in big cities or tourist cities, you can ask for San Francisco or Vancouver or Dublin. And there'll be some places, say like Rio de Janeiro, where the Strand is the beach street. And if you can look up from geographical locations, you will also begin to see some of these things come about. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble coming forward. What is this? But the nice thing, if you remember on the ticket, it said, just like you're in a newsreel, if you think about it, who gets taken their photographs, who gets photographed in public? Well, of course, it's movie stars who get photographed in public, or important people, or politicians. And so in this way, our street vendor photographs work a little bit the same way the carte de visite pictures did, right? that for the 19th century, where 19th century people could pose in a studio and look exactly like Napoleon III. Here's a very nice happy couple at Cliff House in San Francisco, and they look just like Eddie Fisher and Elizabeth Taylor. So this is it's a neat application and a nice insight into what people were thinking about as these pictures were getting made. You know, if they're references newsreels or celebrity pictures in a way we don't see today, but these would have been very common for the people in the pictures, and they're very happy to move into that space on their own, or thanks to the photographer. The pictures I'm going to talk to you about mostly come from San Francisco. This is the Pix movie theater back here is going to figure into our story. And the fact that San Francisco was a very kind of formal, dressed up town gave the photographers who worked on Powell and Market Street around Union Square a lot of really great material. The way I got to know this is through the work of Joe Sell. Here he is. He was the owner of Fox Movie Flash. There he is with one of the cameras. And he was a San Francisco fixture. He stayed in business into the 70s. He finally went out of business and had over 30 years of negatives up in his office. What was he going to do with them? San Francisco Historical Society didn't want them. Certainly the Art Museum didn't want them. But a man named Brent Sycamore, who's now a dealer, had gone to Visual Studies Workshop in Rochester, New York. He was from San Francisco, and he convinced Nathan Lyons, who was head of the Visual Studies Workshop, to pay the freight to get all the film sent to Rochester. And there it sat in the Visual Studies Workshop archives from the 70s until 2002. This is what it looked like. What are you going to do with all this film? It turned out to be 1,000 cans of film, each can holding 100 feet of film, which was set up to shoot half frames, which meant when you added it all together, there were and are 1 million frames of this film. And it got lost until 2002, when Andy Eskind, who was formerly of Eastman House and then was teaching a class with VSW students, took some of this film and took it to the new digitizing houses where you could take movie film and get it digitized. And he and a group of students ended up digitizing 100,000 frames. And those 100,000 frames are now online and you can see them. And this is something along the lines of what this material looks like. In a way, it could say, you know, the most monotonous stuff you've ever seen. But then if you look in carefully, one at a time, you start to see all different things that wouldn't be available. He had Any Other Way, that the material together has a meaning, you know, greater than the sum of its parts. He had some help from some graduate students, including Elizabeth Tonard, who's a Dutch book artist, who's actually made some work from these materials. But they got into this material. They wanted to figure out how to date it, how to locate it. So the actual locations on the streets of San Francisco were possible to identify. The other thing that helped them is a very funny thing with Pix Movie Theater, which is back here. It was a second run house. And so when The King and I was through at the first run houses, you could go see it at Pix. Andy and company got in touch with a man named Jack Tilmany, or he found them. Jack is a local historian, a little bit eccentric. He had been going to Pix. He'd been going to the Pix for years. And in his diary, he recorded the title of every single movie he saw every single date. So they could go back and he would be able to help them identify on the basis of the movie marquee about what time or year or season these pictures were made. Kind of amazing. The other thing that there were also internal clues having to do with the newspaper headlines. So this one was shot on November 22nd, 1963, the day President Kennedy was shot. And there are numerous people carrying newspapers, and you can see evidence of what happened that day. Also, because it's San Francisco, the diversity of the subject matter is especially for our hyper politically aware world, is extremely surprising or delightful. You know, it's a happy surprise to see how many different kinds of faces show up in this archive. And so upper middle class Black women going out the same way, you know, very pretty young white women going out. The faces that the photographers record, you realize they're moving very quickly. The people may or may not be aware that they're being photographed. And the other thing that we don't know because of the negatives is we don't know who bought the pictures. Although I can show you a few that turn out to be ones that are certainly were purchased. Here's a Mexican family. This is up at Cliff House. So more conventional two couples out on a happy day. Friends of mine who are into fashion have been very impressed with just the sheer detail and variety of what people are wearing. I'm more interested in how they're wearing it or what it tells us about the people and their relationships to one another. The other thing about these street pictures, street vendor pictures on the street, is it's really an idea whose time has come. Starting in 1989, Bill Cunningham was running a weekly column in the New York Times called On the Street. And in fact, when he started shooting like this, which was before the column even started, he used an Olympus camera that was very similar to the late 60s cameras that the street vendor photographers were using. So in a way, they are the ancestors of Bill Cunningham. Artists have used this stuff. So Walid Rod and Akram Zatari in 2002 put together a whole exhibition called Mapping Sitting, and it was about the various practices of portraiture, and they were photographic portraiture, and they had ID pictures, and they had beach pictures, and then they had pictures taken from a square in Tripoli in Lebanon. Exactly this, right? Now you can see all of the key elements that we're used to, that we can use to identify this. These street photographers, and it was made by a business called Photojack, was part of Walid Rod's project. Another photographer, Oscar Munoz, who is from Cali, Colombia, was doing a sort of a film about a bridge that bridges the sort of classes and areas of this town of Cali. And he found a collection of 350 negatives by one of these fotocineros, is what they're called in Spanish. He went back, he printed the pictures, he went back to the bridge and got other people to tell him or loan him their pictures, and they talked, and sometimes that he recognized people or they recognized their own pictures. So this became a part of his historical project about ordinary people. what I do want to talk to you, I'm going to show you two examples of history projects where people have used these kinds of pictures in mass to describe civilizations that no longer exist. The first one is Chernovich Poland, which had different names at different times, whether it was now it's in Ukraine, whether it was in Poland or Russia or Austro-Hungary or Romania. Chernovich was called the Vienna of the East. It was a beautiful, cultured city and had a very big Jewish population. Marian Hirsch went back to see the town that her parents had grown up in, and this was in the 90s. Yes, they were still alive. And one of the things that she had were images from Photos Splendide, you can see down there, made, I think these are her parents, walking down the street. So they wanted to see, here's a young Jewish boy with his yarmulke. They wanted to see what Central Europe looked like before the Holocaust, essentially. And these images, again, started to come up. Now there's a Chernovich history website, and many people have contributed these pictures of their relatives, their ancestors, to this overall image of a city that has now, a civilization that's certainly vanished, a part of the world, Central Europe, that got decimated by the Cold War, and a civilization that did not survive. These pictures, this particular set are interesting because you can see here the gold star, yellow star that the Nazis required the Jewish people to wear when they were in public. So this ends up being a document of a society that's about to disappear. Hirsch and her husband took this bunch of material and some of their other precious family photographs to the Holocaust Museum. Again, this was 20 years ago. The Holocaust Museum wanted the walking pictures. They really didn't care about the baby picture, which looked like many other baby pictures, but these were a kind of evidence that they were not familiar with, and they were delighted to have it. The other big project is one about a place called Cape Town Movie Snaps, which was based in Cape Town, South Africa. Cape Town itself was an interesting place. It was a district, Cape Town, and then District 6 was a neighborhood, kind of like Greenwich Village, but it was, in 1867, it was set up for freed slaves and immigrants and merchants and sort of non-white populations, basically. And it was a very lively, mixed, interesting place. And in District 6 is where Cape Town Movie Snaps was located. You've just been photographed by our movie cameraman. There's your number. The movie snaps I found out about because I was talking about this material to a friend who grew up in Cape Town. She was born in the 1940s, and she said, "Oh, Cape Town movie snaps. That's the picture of my mother." And she went and, I'm sorry I don't have it to show you, but she went into her bedroom and came out with a little walking picture of her mom going back and forth in front of Cape Town Movie Snaps. If you went downtown for anything, if you want a passport service here, it will only take you an hour. They put up all the pictures that they snapped in the shop window, and if you wanted it, you could buy it later. Here is a picture of District 6, which after 1966 started to look like this because it was ruled to be 100% white and was demolished. Shauna O'Connell was looking for information about District 6. She had a one of these walking pictures that she had gotten from her grandmother. She put an ad in the newspaper to see if anybody else had them, expecting 20 or 40 or 30 or maybe, and she got hundreds. And it turned into a big oral history project, and there's a couple movies that are associated with it that I will give you links to. But what she was surprised about was the variations in the people. There were Black people, this is a Jewish couple, this is a mixed race couple, the variety, and also the way in which, again, everyone was treated exactly the same. So this kind of unifying experience for South Africa in the first or second decade of the 20th century was really important. This is a picture of Shauna and her grandmother. And what she also said was this particular image gave her a vision of her grandmother as a grown-up, polished, assertive, confident woman. As a little girl, she wouldn't have been able to be aware of that. But as a grown-up person, she saw a woman whom apartheid denied existed. And here's the living proof that that world was there. I got some very good help because I'm a scholar, I hope, I can't help it. What do we see in these pictures? How can we describe what's going on here? And Shauna gave me a clue. This is the woman that my grandmother believed herself to be. And there's a very interesting sociology book by Irving Goffman called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And he went about this trying to describe our social selves. When an individual plays a part, he implicitly requests his observers to take seriously the impression that he puts before them. The character they see actually possesses the attributes he appears to possess. That matters are what they appear to be. And so I'm looking now at these images as the presentation of all these different selves in this public, right? Also, the way it works is you're both performing, you're a performer and an audience. Here, this family has the audience of Fox Movies Flash, one of the operators that worked for Josel. But think about what kind of evidence is here before us about the younger brother, the older brother, the father and the mother behind them, supporting them. What kind of evidence about the world does this picture give us? And then, and the thing is that we know that there's lots of different kinds of people in the world. It turned out I was picking out stuff. These are made at a Sacramento State Fair. This is mothers and daughters. My mom's birthday was last week. So mothers and daughters. Here they are performing themselves for us through the medium of Fox Movie Flash. Individual people are of interest, and so that there's somebody on the street, he's snapping her picture. We just don't know whether she bought the picture. All we know is what the photographer thought would be a good bet. Here, he must have really liked the way these women looked. There are wonderful pictures of families, and obviously a family together might well want to get a picture of themselves as a group at the fair. But it doesn't matter what color family you are, right? Any family who could afford a quarter to buy a picture was of interest to this photographer, to the street vendor photographer. So that's where I'm getting my ideas about a picture of a democratic world, because the camera And the man behind the camera took pictures of everyone. Here's a very young family. Here's a sailor on leave with very chic blonde. They're all different kinds of couples. So here's a little dating couple, and she's Asian and he's not Asian. And here's some very serious smokers who I thought were kind of funny. But we're seeing through this huge archive of film, we're able to see what the photographer believed would be the way to make a dollar. Not her. She was not very happy about it. Can you see this? Is all this stuff in the way? Whereas these people stopped. Obviously, this mother and this little girl were very happy to be photographed. And often you'll see a couple frames together where he caught this group, this family walking, which is really kind of an interesting picture, but then they stopped to be photographed. Not so interesting to the arty people among us, but it was probably very interesting to the photographer because he knew he made a sale. So what I'm thinking about here is what we can learn from seeing these pictures en masse. And what does it tell us that's different from seeing one at a time, or even grouping them in different ways, nighttime, daytime. And for that, I looked to another scholar named Alan Sekula, who worked with a different archive of pictures of ordinary people, which were the negative archives of Leslie Shedden in Glace Bay, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. As he went about trying to understand all these different kinds of pictures, he said he wants to understand the relationship between photographic culture and economic life. Okay. How does photography normalize existing power relationships? For the people in Glace Bay, he was seeing that the miners were the subjects of this larger corporation, and Leslie Shedden, in taking pictures of them for PR or for company reports, on a very superficial level, that Shedden was the agent of the corporation, and that these people were definitely less powerful. The camera was more powerful. The employer of the camera, the corporation, was the most powerful. And Alan Sekula likes, and many scholars following him, like to see where the power is in the relationship between the person behind the camera and the person in front of the camera. We do this with models and fashion. We do it with all different kinds of pictures. But I think that what happens when you get to these street vendor pictures, this model, this very powerful model about where is the power, falls apart. And that really what these pictures show us is a moment where the photographer and the subject are equal. They're equal. So you say, well, okay, how can that be? The guy's taking the picture and they're in front of the camera. Well, first of all, they're both in the situation where the camera will be. At a state fair or at the university graduation in Berkeley, that would be one thing. And going downtown Union Square in San Francisco, where this one was made, is something else. But they're all there, and they all know they're there. They all belong there. And really, though the guy takes the picture and hands them the card, if he doesn't make a sale, he doesn't get anything. And only if they buy something do they get something. So in the most optimistic setup, he'll offer the card, they'll take it up, and he'll get a sale and they'll get a picture. But when you see these people who are not being overpowered, nor are they subjecting the photographer to their will, here we have a situation where the photographer and the subjects are equal to one another. And there is something very powerful and unusual that happens. And in a way, what I keep finding in these pictures is an enormous amount of empathy between the photographer and the subject. You know, it's in his, and they are always men. I have not found a single woman who does this, but it's in his interest to find her and please her. And so he has no incentive to do anything but to photograph what he sees and do the best he can with it. And then, and so the results are a very different picture of our world. And it might, you know, the world of America in the 40s and 50s, early 60s, at a moment when this picture of democracy was really possible. And I find it tremendously moving. So that's my spiel on the street vendors. I hope you liked it. I do want to tell you one more thing though. Andy Eskin, who introduced me to Joe Sell and all of this photography, is my husband. So I've got more than just a scholarly interest in this material. And Andy reminded me, Andy's on the left, that the street vendor photographer is alive and well in the form of Luis Mendez on the left, who is a New York photography person. He's often around B&H Photo, or he'll come to big photo fairs. And so he took Bob and Andy's picture for about 20 bucks. And then Andy took Lewis's picture. But I understand the next time we will be able to get together for a photo fair that Lewis's prices have gone up. So if you're looking for a street vendor, be prepared to shell out something. Anyhow, that's my talk. I hope you liked it, and I'm be very happy to hear any questions or comments, and especially if you've been photographed by one of these people.
Thank you, Mary. That was excellent. And I love seeing these pictures and the photographers.
Yeah.
I do have some questions coming through on chat. So what I'm going to do is just go up to the top and start at the beginning. I have a few I'll throw in there that I was thinking of too.
Okay.
First one is from David Starkman, and he has two questions. One, are they always vertical, showing the subject from head to toe? And could you show the camera again and explain what is unique about it for taking these photos?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Let's see if I can. Let's see. It's just at the very first example I showed was here's a vertical, or horizontal. I mean, the horizontals do exist. They certainly do exist. But the first group of the Americans in Wiesbaden was also a horizontal. But the usual thing is the vertical. And here's our camera. Oh, I love these pictures so much. Okay. There, okay, there's his, there, can you see the camera? Is that good enough, or do you want the drawing, the ad picture instead?
I'd love to see the close-up.
Oh, can we go in?
Yeah, the drawing.
Okay, hold on. There you go.
Right, okay.
Actually, I have a picture of me holding one, but this is better. So can you see that there was a prism here, and the card, the number on the card would register on the negative at the same time that the image was registered.
Oh, so that's how they knew which picture went with which negative.
That's right. That's right. And there are some business records from one of the operators. He gave it to the National Museum of American History at Smithsonian in DC. And they kept letters from people who thought the picture was lousy and wanted their money back, but no one ever said they got the wrong picture. You know, I think that this system was worked very well, that you matched up the ticket number with the negative, printed it, sent it back. And so that was really, that's what these cameras offered. Later on, they used an Olympus pen with that made half frames on the film, and I don't know how people recorded I don't know how they matched the customer with the negative.
That's the camera that took 100-foot roll.
This is the one that took 100-foot roll.
Uh-huh. Thanks.
Or what they would do also, if the guy, I'm not quite sure how it worked, because what if one guy got a bunch of orders, then he would have to cut the film and process whatever got purchased, right? Or maybe if somebody had a bad day, they would just keep the film in the camera and somebody else would take it out the next day. And then the cans, so the cans had not every can had one piece of film continuous for 100 feet. It just held 100 feet worth of film. You see what I mean?
Could I make a comment on this? Am I coming through?
Yes.
I have one of these. This is a DeVry standard 35 millimeter camera that was modified, and I have a second one that was modified in a different way. But these were made for regular movie camera things, but you press the release button a different way and get single frames, so they were used for single frames. And some people use 16 millimeter movie cameras that would also take, so there are a lot of cameras that would do this kind of thing, but they all had to be modified in some way.
Uh-huh. Right. No, DeVry was, I think DeVry was the biggest manufacturer.
Yeah. And I don't know how these guys use it, because this is a very heavy camera, and having that thing hanging on your shoulder all day, I can't imagine how they did it.
Well, they had a harness. I mean, if I can get to Joe's cell. Where are you, Joe? There he is. It might have been a smaller, I don't know. And also,
that's the same camera.
Yeah. Yeah. He made it work.
Yeah.
We have some more questions in chat I'm going to read.
Great.
Drew B is asking, what did the photographers do with photos that no one was interested in buying?
Well, they didn't print them. They only printed, these guys only printed what they were paid to print, but you had to develop the whole roll of film.
Right.
So the archive has all the film that got developed and kept. So that they didn't cut it, they didn't cut one frame that was purchased and slice it out of the rest of the roll. The roll stayed intact.
Right.
So that's why this gives us a very different view than you get from surfing the flea market tables. All the ones on the flea market, somebody bought and paid to get made. Whereas the archive of negatives shows you all the things that were shot, whether anybody wanted them or not. It's a very different perspective.
Would you be able to post the URL of the archive that's online into the chat?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
yes.
That would be great. We'd love to see those.
Yes.
What if someone was making money on the street as a photographer like this? I'm assuming they wouldn't have a lot of money to have an expensive darkroom somewhere in a city. So, do you know anything about how these operations were processing their film?
Well, I mean, Joe Sell kept his own darkroom for all of his operators because he employed lots of people. Other ones are other times in Tucson, for example, there was a couple guys who worked and they had a partnership with a drugstore that developed the film. And then people came by to see their pictures in the window. So if there was a film processing place, like a little local one, they would maybe have a partnership. Or you were on your own and you know, developing film isn't that difficult. It's black and white film. You can do it in the bathtub if that's what you really want to do, right?
Yeah.
This is not fancy.
Larry has a question related to that about any idea of the economics of this kind of activity, like what kind of a living could a photographer make?
Well, that really varied between, according to how successful you were about selling your work or engaging your subjects. And we could see from the business records at the Smithsonian, there were some people who worked several days a week. A couple people showed up and never came back. I think it's all over the place. I'm not sure. I mean, Joe Sell himself, this wasn't his only business. He also had a dairy farm or something out in Northern California. But but these ads, the ads for the cameras, promise that you can do very well. You know, all you need is a walking street, you know. Operators who are working with these cameras report a remarkably heavy percentage of returns. You know, your costs are negligible. Film is cheap. So users report remarkable returns. I mean, I don't know how many single people did this, but the fact that it's being done all over, and more in the past when few people had any cameras. Now, of course, I mean, aside from getting a really groovy Polaroid from Lewis, you don't need this any longer. So it really is leading us to a place that's very hard for us to imagine, where the only way you'll get a picture of yourself is if somebody else takes it for you. So I don't know exactly, but Sell had some people who worked for him for a very long time. That's not a good answer, but it's the only answer I've got.
No, it's good. There's a question from Francis, or just a comment that the waist-high position of the camera is key to the unstudied capture of the subjects looking down into the viewfinder instead of maybe looking someone straight in the face with a camera?
Well, it certainly works very well. Bill Cunningham used a Leica when he wasn't using an Olympus pen, but he's really good at that stuff. So I think probably this camera gave more people good results. And also it meant that you could look the person in the face right away. So that would certainly help with sales. Bill Cunningham wasn't selling his pictures to anybody.
His photographs always, the sort of fashion-centric thing, it sort of makes me think like those people wanted to be captured if it was Fashion Week or if it was the Fashion District. It wasn't maybe as candid as the other ones. I don't know what you think about that.
I think he got more famous, but I think he was, I've also seen him saw him working on the street, and he was very inconspicuous and he moved very quickly.
Wow.
So you wouldn't know when I mean, some people did know, but he could get quite a lot of work done without anyone knowing about it. But again, he was unusual.
Those are great pictures.
Yeah. Well, actually, in the one time I talked to him, I said, "Oh, Mr. Cunningham, I admire your work so much." And he said, "Well, it's not me, it's them," which is perfect, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Fred has a question. Was the field of view consistent between these cameras?
Oh, I don't know that, because the only ones I've ever seen are the DeVry. So between each of the DeVry cameras? I think so, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
There's a question from Denise about the pictures that are now on the VSW website.
Mhm.
Are they organized by year or location? And she says, great talk.
Oh, thanks, Denise. They are organized by location, and some of them are by year. And there's also a different website where you can find them. And I'm looking for, I can never remember it. If you can hold on for just a second. Hold on, everybody. I'll be right back.
Oh, Dana,
Dana, nowadays, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joseph.
did you get a comment from me, Joe Marlin? Because I wrote one in and clicked everyone, so I thought it would show up. Do you not have one?
I don't have one yet. I'm scrolling down the list, Joe.
No, I did it several minutes ago. So if I clicked everyone, why doesn't it show up?
I don't know. I don't see it.
You could ask in person.
Did you, yeah, you certainly can. And, you know, if you hit return, is it? I'm not looking at the.
And this has happened before on other talks, on other Zoom things, and I don't know why I can't seem to get something that shows up. I have the typing right in front of me, and I clicked.
You have to click return to send it.
Okay.
Oh, return?
Return after you type.
Where does that appear?
Just the enter key.
On your keyboard, you would hit the enter. There's no button to send you. Once you're done typing, you hit enter.
Oh, well, that's
Jack Billington?
AndrewEskin.com.
all right.
And we can also, when the chat is published on YouTube, when the program is published, we can include some more notes and details along with that.
I hit enter, so mine should show up.
All right, I'll get to you. I'll get to you. Where were we? Okay. Francis just said that they meant the capture of unstudied subjects. Reich says the power relationships are fascinating. How do you as a curator compare the street vendor to fine art street photographers like Joel Meyerowitz or Gary Winogrand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, well, this is very good because Larry List just added, what about the surveillance cameras? And this isn't quite that either. Although I'm sure if we were watching a murder mystery, the surveillance people could use one of these pictures to discover that somebody was.
That's the Columbo episode I was telling you about.
Right. So the art photographers are prowling the streets with their cameras, seeing what they have to see, and creating something new out of their own sensibility and as an expression of their own point of view. The fact that you're in their picture is the smallest part of what's important about it. The biggest part is what Robert Frank sees when he goes out there, that he'll see something that the rest of us wouldn't. In that way, the street vendor photographers are the same in that they see something in these individuals or families that we wouldn't see because we're too busy walking down the street. But what the street vendor sees is something that's valuable to the person in the picture. Whereas what Robert Frank sees is something that's valuable to Robert Frank and to the greater world of art consumers or viewers. So that's my understanding of it. And then there's the mysterious, anyway, I'll stop right there.
Audrey has a question. Were the names of the photographers themselves ever credited on the postcard? And was the advent of Polaroid technology detrimental to this profession?
The individual photographers were never credited. The only thing that's credited is the business. There were some businesses that only had one person, you know, working for them. I don't know how many photographers worked in Tripoli for Photojack, for example, or Photo Splendide. I don't know if that was one or two people in Chernovich or not. Polaroid, I'll tell you, early Polaroids were not very stable. So, but there's plenty of examples of photographers who are out there to sell you a picture because they've taken it. I mean, think about the photographers who used to work at the Stork Club, or, you know, they were building and they would come back, they would develop the film and come back in, you know, in half an hour with your picture. So, and these street vendors would never have been inside a restaurant. The way they did photograph at night was that Sell's office was, I don't know where I've got a night picture to show you. Well, here,
Yeah.
one. Oops. Just take that away. Sell's office was right here, the entry to his office building, and they hauled down big generators and set up lights on the sidewalk for to make these pictures, these nighttime pictures. But they weren't walking around with the flash material. They weren't walking around with the flash stuff to carry. It would have been too heavy. They needed too much light. And this, you know, see here, The King and I was playing that night.
David has a question. Since each picture has a number that matches the postcards, it would have been easy to keep the 100-foot rolls and use something like a film editing setup to scan through the roll to find the negative number as needed and never cut the roll, just print the ones that are ordered.
Right, right. Because that notation was right there, you know, available.
Let's see. Roy has a question. Part of the marketing was that not everyone or every family owned a camera, so photos were hard to come by, portraits were expensive, and not quite like today.
I mean, we've even seen pictures, I didn't have any to show you here, but say like there's a little girl with her brownie box camera, but she's standing with her family getting their picture taken at the state fair. So even when you had a camera, you weren't necessarily going to get the picture that the street vendor guy could get for you.
Yeah, I was thinking about the fact that it's a motion picture camera. In newsreels, when I see old black and white newsreels, people are just sort of moving by and you don't get that instant where you really look at them and see them and wonder. These are very arresting because you think those were the people in the newsreels I didn't think twice about, sort of, because.
Right. Well, right, I mean, no, you wouldn't. You're walking down the street, you don't think twice about any of those people. And here, this gives us an opportunity to think twice.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, but the other thing is that that's also, it's also indicates or sort of communicates another philosophy about the person in the crowd, that this could be you, right? That you're worth looking at too. So, and I'm not, I just find it very, very moving that this is a way to, first of all, it's a way to identify each individual as someone of worth. And then the fact that worth has nothing to do with your skin color, you know, or your class, or your location, or your mood, right?
I'm going to, we're getting close to the end of our time here. I believe Jack said he had the camera to show us.
Oh.
So if people want to switch to speaker view up at the top, and Mary, if you stop sharing your screen for a moment,
Right.
we'll be able to see the camera that Jack has. Do you have that, Jack? Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, no, wait. There.
Jack, are you there?
Is he muted?
Through here.
There you go.
We're getting through now?
Yes, I can see you.
Here's the camera. Can you see it?
Yep.
It's heavy as hell. Please look.
Oh, I think that's heavier than the ones these guys have.
This is the one you showed in the first picture. It's called a Lunchbox Camera. And what they did was they convert these over to taking single shots on 16mm film. And that's why they had it tipped up like that.
Right.
And they were taking the single shots, and then they would develop them and print them and send them out, like you said. But
You hold it up a little higher, please?
this camera is exactly the kind they were using. It's very, very heavy.
Well,
Yeah.
here's another one. Here's another one. Can I share that screen?
Yeah, you can go back to sharing the screen. You just have to do it again.
Okay.
Here. Whoa. Can you see that? Can you see that slide now?
Nope.
No.
Oh, well.
Mary, we see a whiteboard. What I would recommend is hit stop sharing and then try to share one more time.
Okay, well, I don't know where okay. You guys are so patient with this. I would,
Dana, do you want me to, I have one of those Acme cameras. Do you want me?
that?
Oh, there you go.
Then I don't need to show mine because mine's the same as that.
Yeah, it's a DeVay camera.
Mhm.
It's the same kind as you're showing in your picture.
Show the front.
Yeah,
That's the front.
yeah. So anyway, and it's got a little sample picture on the front to entice another buyer.
I like that.
There was a lot of street cameras. I have about a dozen of them.
Oh,
They were made to develop the pictures right in the camera itself. They had
Oh,
tape on the bottom. And
Right.
they could have you stand there and they could give you your picture in a few minutes.
Yeah, that's what my comment
Printed on
was
was like
about,
bullet
but it
bills
never
with
showed up
red wall.
apparently. It was, it used paper positives. They were earlier from 1900 and some were still being used in Afghanistan in 1980s.
that's right.
And they used paper positives and then they had a couple tanks of liquid, one to develop and one to fix and a dryer. And you sold them on the spot and they were not film, of course, they were paper. And that was an earlier method and there were dozens and hundreds of models of those made. whereas the film cameras were all modified.
Right.
Although the paper positives were often modified too. Some were folding cameras, some were view cameras. People modified all kinds of things and put big boxes around them to make them light tight. And there is a book that I have.
Oh, there it is. Oh,
That a
oh,
fellow who lives in Geneva, Switzerland, took pictures of people using these older type of paper positive cameras all over the world. It was in South America, Central America, Eastern and Western Europe, Asia. He took pictures and described these people, but none of them were film cameras like what you've talked about.
Right.
They were this earlier type that was still being used in third world countries, so to speak.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, well, they were called Minotaros. The French people called them surpriseurs, surprise guys.
Yeah, that's what part of this book is in, the text is in Spanish, French, and English.
Oh,
So Minotaros is right up here. Just the word you just
Yeah.
used is right on the title page.
yeah.
That's great. How are we doing for time, Ben?
I think we're doing pretty well overall, but I did look. We have quite a few questions still in the
Yes.
chat. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get through all of them.
Right.
So I'll volunteer that. I had some really great questions myself in there, but you can skip over mine, Dana. But if you want to wrap up a few more questions, I think that was such a great presentation. Actually, I'd recommend right now maybe we could all come off mute and give Mary a proper round of applause if that works.
How?
Absolutely.
Give it just a second. But yeah, great job, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. It's really fun to talk to you, all these people who are interested in cameras. Photo fiends, my favorite.
Oh, one thing I noticed, if I could just, I think I'm correct. In the picture that you had of the first picture you showed of Wiesbaden,
Yes,
in the upper left-hand corner, very faded out, was a Kodak sign.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
You could barely make it out, but it looked like a triangular Kodak sign from the 30s.
Yeah. It is, and actually, there's another bigger Kodak sign on the side of the building.
Oh, that I must have missed.
Well, anyhow, you did see it.
Let's let me try and squeeze in a few more questions, if that's okay. There was a question from John Felix who says, it seems people were asked to take a chance when asked to purchase a photo they hadn't seen.
That's right.
Do you think the people who actually purchased their photo tended to be risk takers, or who could afford to take a risk of buying something they might not like?
Well, I think yes, they had to be risk takers, but also I think thinking about what Irving Goffman said, that everybody who was involved with this system of exchange knew the rules, right? That whoever was doing this wasn't doing it for the first time, or they'd seen it before, or somebody else, that they would have seen one of these images before. So then they have to take a chance on whether this guy got anything worthwhile. And I showed you some good ones. There's some that are out of focus and completely nothing you'd really want to hold on to. But I think, and also we forget how long it took to see anything from your camera. I mean, think about it. Robert Frank couldn't see what he photographed till he brought it home. There's none of this, there's none of this snap and see, right? My friend Larry says that photographers all have to be psychologists, but which I think is absolutely the case with this kind of stuff. You have to make your sale, make a case for what you're doing.
Yes, and Larry just has a comment that it's an interesting, innocent flip side to current street surveillance photography.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's see, maybe just a few more. question from Ben. Have you ever seen historical video footage of these photographers in action?
No, but I'm sure it exists of some, there must be something. And actually, Ouija was in a film called Every Girl Should Get Married. It's a really stupid movie, but there is a little clip of Ouija dressed up in one of Joe Sell's outfits. And he makes the picture of a man who's walking with I think with someone who's not his wife, and he gets in trouble. So when I work on this again, I'll get that film clip and stick it in there.
Question from Reich. In another way, as a curator, do you see relationship between photographers who want to remain anonymous, such as the once anonymous Vivian Mayer versus the street vendors? I have so many mixed feelings about Vivian Mayer that that I just can't go there. But she did take pictures and she did develop them and she did not share them. Whereas the street vendors, even though they took them and didn't put their name on them, they were made to share. So she's more complicated than they are. This is a very simple relationship, I think.
Got it.
If anyone has any questions they want to add, we can take maybe 2 more if people want to speak up and unmute themselves. Or just have a few more minutes.
Oh, here's somebody. Oh, Ernest Stonebreaker was photographed in Chicago by one of these guys.
Oh, I didn't buy the picture and the sidewalk was littered with cards the people had thrown away. Oh boy.
That's a great, I would love to have a picture of that.
Has anyone else had a picture taken this way? Anybody viewing tonight?
In there. On the ice, on the refrigerator. My picture in there on the horse.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm coming a little late to this, but I do have a question about an exhibition. Have you organized this as an exhibition, Mary?
No, I haven't.
Boy, would that be a fantastic thing to see the prints on the wall and to see some other street photography done, you know, maybe that we're more familiar with.
Well, I'll tell you, it would be fun. The other thing that I had an idea about was to take these and project them one at a time.
Yes.
So that it would be like you guys, it would be like having a slideshow, only the slideshow would be on the wall. And we'd see one picture, one picture, one
I think that would be great. I mean, I know that they're half frame 35, but it would be nice to see them projected on the wall. It'd be more alive that way. It'd be more real. It would be like you're taking part of the street and you're just putting it up on the wall because it would feel alive.
That's right.
And you don't have to frame them. You don't have to put, you know, all that crazy stuff. It would be really great to see that.
Well, I have to find a venue that's interested in doing that kind of projection, because if it's a gallery, they need something to sell.
Yeah.
And there's nothing here to sell.
How about something like the ICP in New York?
Well, you think I should pitch it to them?
How about the
Well,
Griffin?
I think it's so good. It's such a great thing. I think it would be better in a museum as opposed to a gallery, because it would be nice if they didn't have to sell it, if they just could show it and we could just enjoy it and understand it. I mean,
from your lips to their ears, I would love, I'm very happy that you guys like this.
Oh, I think it's awesome. I just think to make it.
Good idea.
Pardon me?
Well, why not a book? I mean, there's books of, you know, people who collect the photo booth pictures, the strips of 4, and there's been books.
No, absolutely.
Of those.
Absolutely.
So why
it's
not
almost like
these?
This Farmer. It's almost like a version of This Farmer out of the studio, you know, and that's those 2 beautiful books that they did, and the pictures are only like, you know, maybe 7 inches tall or 5 to 6 inches tall. And just then, boy, would that be nice to show that work with this farmer's work.
Here's a picture of me taken like that.
Gotta pick it up.
Let me see. Hold it up.
I was 3 years old when this was taken.
We can't see it. There, hold it right in front of your face.
Can you hear me?
Up in front of you.
Oh, how's that?
Higher.
Higher.
It's me.
Smile.
Higher?
Yeah.
There you go.
There we
You're
go.
a good kid.
Okay, the photographer pulled up with a Model A car in front of the house, pulled the pony out of the back seat, put me on the pony, took my picture, developed it, and then went over and rang the doorbell and sold it to my mother for a dime or a half a dollar. I don't
I
know
like
what.
it. I like it.
But
The
that's
pony
about
was in the car?
2 years ago this was done.
I don't think it was a live pony.
You know, one last thing about
Tony just
your
stood there.
exhibition, Mary. One last thing. I was just thinking how haunting it would be to take the pictures back to Europe in that town and
Oh.
project them on the side of a building. I mean, it would just be brutal. It would be so sad, but so important.
Well, yes. Well, I was trying to figure out a way to do this in San Francisco. But
Mary, can you put your email in the chat in case
yes.
people
I
would
was
like
just
to
gonna
contact
ask.
you?
I'd just like to be able to communicate with you sometime if I have an idea.
There it is. I see it. Thank you, Mary.
Can you, I don't see it. Can you? Oh, there it is. Oh, that's a tough one.
I know. You never remember.
I don't even have to write it down.
Well, I don't know. The Griffin Museum might bite. I've never worked with them.
You could try and make that happen.
I would love that. I think Mass Mocha would be really fun. One of those spaces.
Right.
Fill it up.
We have that big projection space in outdoor area too.
Oh, that's right. Oh, what a good idea. Thank you so much, Mrs. Gottlieb.
I love this. I love this talk.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. Dana and Joel and Bennett were really great getting me prepped.
This was a great night. Thank you. This was really great.
It really
Thank
was.
you, everyone, for coming and for joining us tonight. And Ben is going to make the talks available. They're on the YouTube channel.
Oh, cool.
You can find them, like if you're on YouTube, I think he said, if you searched for PHSNE, you should find the channel. You can subscribe to it, I believe. And
actually, you know, Dana, I did want to see if we could work in a plug for the YouTube channel. I know we've mentioned it a couple of times. We only have about 12 subscribers. I will put in the link until the track. I think we have about 12 subscribers right now, and I would love for us to hit like a subscriber milestone, like 50 subscribers or something. So sure. I am going to pull that up right now, and I'll put the link in the chat. And if anyone, you have to log into YouTube, which is basically your Gmail account. So you have to log into YouTube to subscribe. But once you're in there, you can follow us. That would be great.
Excellent. Wow.
Okay.
This has been
going
so
in the
great.
chat now.
Mary, don't give up on San Francisco.
All right, John.
There's something nice about that.
Yeah, there is something nice about it, but something makes me think that it's going to have to be outside of San Francisco first, and then they'll, this was like the local guy, no one ever likes the local guy.
It's so true. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you. It was a great night.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey.
All right, I think we're gonna close, but join us next month. We have Ned Quist is going to share amateur photographers documenting the Shaker community in April.
Great.
So keep your eyes open for your snapshots, and that'll be described in there. And David just subscribed.
Are we
Got one, Ben.
Are you guys going to do Photographica? Is that going to happen this year, you think?
Dana, I've heard some updates on that. Basically, the Photographica is postponed at a minimum until the fall. But I think that my personal feeling is that I'm guessing it's probably not going to happen in the fall. It would probably go back in spring. But I'm not.
Whoa.
That's just me as not as a coordinator of the event, but
Yeah.
kind of what
If I
I
can
what I
jump
think.
in for a second, if I can jump in, this was discussed at the board meeting this afternoon with John Dockery, and he felt that he should have a definitive decision by the end of July.
That makes sense.
He
That
said
makes
that
sense.
if it doesn't happen by the end of July, it will not happen. He was concerned it might be too early, but we will consider it up until the end of July.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Well, Dana, I think that pretty much does it. I'm looking forward to this presentation and on the shakers. And Mary, thank you so much for presenting that. It gave us a really nice insight into the whole a lot of different areas of the world.
Actually, I have one suggestion, Mary.
Yes.
You know, Howard Greenberg would love this.
Howard,
He would. And you know, he would be a huge connection, but he's quirky and he loves this kind of stuff.
okay, John.
I
Okay.
can tell you guys are going to be emailing, which is great.
Many ideas. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a great
Night,
night.
everyone.
You guys are all great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Ciao.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Take care.
Great job, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
No.